A truth that shakes the foundations of what we've been taught. A truth that leads us back.
The oldest copy of the Ethiopian Bible, which is full in terms of a Genesis to Revelation copy, is 14th century.
For 2,000 years, one Bible stayed hidden in the mountains of Ethiopia, untouched by Rome, untouched by empire, untouched by time. Inside it is a passage the world was never meant to see, a message said to come from Jesus after his resurrection, a message so bold, so different, it could change everything we think we know. But why was it kept secret? For nearly 2,000 years, a single ancient Bible rested in the high mountains of Ethiopia, far from Rome, far from Europe, and far from the hands that shaped the Western story of Christianity. No council touched it, no empire edited it. It survived fire, war, invasions, and even the rise and fall of kingdoms. And inside this weathered manuscript, written in fading Ge'ez ink, lies a passage almost no one outside Ethiopia has ever seen. It describes something extraordinary, a moment after the resurrection, a moment where Jesus speaks again, not in the way we know, not in the way we were taught, but in words that feel older, quieter, and dangerously direct. Words that point to a very different message, one that may have changed history if the world had seen it. But the real mystery is not what the passage says. It's why Ethiopia kept it hidden for so long.
Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more awe-inspiring stories of faith, survival, and miracles.
The story begins in a remote monastery perched on a cliff in northern Ethiopia. For generations, the monks guarded a small collection of manuscripts wrapped in goatskin and tied with woven cords. They believed these books were more than history. They were living memory, carried across centuries by men who risked their lives to protect them. Among these manuscripts was a volume unlike the rest. Its pages were darker, its ink older, its binding repaired so many times that each thread felt like a century. Scholars who later examined it noticed something strange. The style of writing suggested a date far earlier than most surviving Christian texts. Some even believed it could reach back to the first centuries after Jesus walked the earth. But that wasn't the most surprising part. The shock came when they turned to a section no Western Bible contains. Most ancient texts were lost because they lived in the center of empires, where wars burned libraries, rulers rewrote stories, and councils decided what belonged. But Ethiopia was different. Its mountains acted like walls. Its churches sat in places armies could not reach. And its monks followed a tradition older than many kingdoms. Copy everything. Protect everything. Question nothing that came from the ancestors.
While Europe argued over which books were official, Ethiopia kept a wider library. They preserved writings that never passed through Roman hands, never faced imperial editors, never sat under political pressure. This is why their manuscripts often look strange to outsiders. They show a version of early Christianity that grew without Roman influence. And inside this untouched world, one book held a passage that didn't match any other gospel, a passage that seemed too bold to ignore and too dangerous to publish. When scholars first translated the mysterious section, they expected a familiar story, something close to the gospel accounts. Instead, they found short, poetic lines, almost like whispered teachings. In these lines, Jesus speaks to his followers after rising from the tomb, not in grand speeches, but in simple, direct phrases. One line described a light within every heart that cannot die. Another warned that power will chase the truth until truth hides itself. These sayings did not appear in any Western Bible, and yet they sounded ancient, closer to the early oral traditions than the later edited versions. Some experts believed these lines might reflect teachings passed down before the canon was formed. Others said they were too unusual, too sharp, too challenging to fit the story that later rulers wanted. But the real shock came from one phrase, a phrase that hinted at why this text vanished from the world. In the disputed passage, Jesus meets his followers in a quiet place. There is no crowd, no miracle, no dramatic sign, only a calm voice. He tells them that his message will be changed by those who seek power, and that only those who guard silence will hear the full truth. These words felt too pointed, too aware, almost as if warning the future church itself. Then came the most controversial line, "Do not fear those who preach in my name, yet do not know me." This single sentence sent scholars into debate. Some said it reflected early Christian conflicts. Others argued it was added later, but Ethiopian monks insisted it was always there, passed down by their ancestors, protected in secret rooms for centuries. If this saying is authentic, it challenges the heart of the early church's authority, which raises the question, who wanted this warning erased? To understand why these words never reached the Western world, we must look at the early councils that shaped Christianity. Rome needed unity, empires feared disagreement, and faith was becoming a tool of power. The leaders selected texts that supported their structure. Clear rules, clear hierarchy, clear control. Sayings like the Ethiopian passage, which warned about leaders twisting the message, would have created chaos. They suggested that spiritual truth lived inside each person, not inside institutions. They questioned authority. They challenged the idea that only certain voices could speak for God. For an empire trying to hold millions together, that was unacceptable. So when Western Christianity narrowed its canon, Ethiopia kept the wider tradition. Their books remained untouched by Roman politics. But that means something else, too. If Rome rejected these sayings, what else did Ethiopia keep that the world still doesn't know about? For generations, Ethiopian monks carried manuscripts into hidden rooms carved into stone cliffs. Some rooms could only be reached by rope. Some were sealed for decades. These men believed knowledge could be stolen, but only if it was found, so they made sure it never was. Travelers wrote of priests who memorized entire books so the words could live even if the pages were destroyed. Among these protected texts were writings that never appeared in any Western collection, ancient hymns, miracle traditions, and strange stories about the early church. Scholars who gained access were stunned by how old some manuscripts seemed, older than many European copies. Several monks quietly suggested that other sayings of the teacher still rest in locked chambers. When asked why they remain hidden, the answer was always the same. The world is not ready. But ready for what? What truth could still be waiting in those sealed rooms? When translated, the hidden passage presents a softer, more inward message than the structured doctrine that later formed in the West. Jesus speaks less about rules and more about the inner life, the quiet mind, the heart that forgives, the power of humility. One line says, "The loudest teacher is not the truest one." Another adds, "The kingdom grows in places no one looks." These ideas fit early Christian teachings found in other ancient texts, but conflict with the more formal institutional version of the faith that developed later. If this Ethiopian passage truly reflects early tradition, it suggests that the first followers heard a message much simpler and far harder for rulers to control. This would reshape how we see the rise of Christian power. So scholars asked the hardest question. If these words are genuine, what else about early Christianity might be missing? If authentic, this passage may reveal a different path Christianity could have taken, one focused on inner transformation rather than strict authority. It suggests Jesus warned that his message would be reshaped, softened, or bent by future leaders. It suggests the earliest communities valued personal experience of the divine, not only structured doctrine. And it implies that the story of the resurrection was not only a moment of victory, but also a warning. This doesn't erase the Bible as we know it, but it widens it. It complicates it. It invites questions about what early believers heard, what they wrote, and what they chose to protect. Ethiopia's version of events forces historians to consider that the Western story is only one branch of a much larger tree. But there is still one final mystery. If this passage survived, could there be an even older one we haven't seen yet? Today, there are still monasteries in Ethiopia that outsiders have never entered. Some sit on cliffs higher than skyscrapers. Some require ladders carved into the mountain. And inside them, monks say, are manuscripts no scholar has ever touched. They claim some are older than the Garima Gospels, older than the earliest Western copies, older than the councils that decided what Christianity would become. One monk once said that among these sealed texts are words spoken after the rising, meant only for those who listen. No one knows if this is legend or truth, but if even a fraction is real, then the hidden passage we explored may only be the beginning. Because somewhere in the mountains of Ethiopia, in a locked chamber lit only by oil lamps, there may be more words of Jesus, waiting in silence, untouched for 2,000 years, and the world has no idea what they say.